All right, everyone. Okay, we can see you now, right?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Okay, everybody. So my name is Perry Pyle, and thank you for joining us this evening for All Aboard Railways of Arizona. I am joined here today by Ken Karrels of the Southern Arizona Transportation Museum. And for those of you who signed up earlier with, we had originally announced that Ken was going to be our only speaker today, but we actually had two other speakers join in. So bonus content today. Everyone who, if you, so because we have a couple more speakers, we're going to be a little bit more, we're going to go a little bit over the originally scheduled time. And so if you have to hop off early, don't worry, we're recording this and the link will be sent out afterwards. So you'll have that and you'll be able to revisit and finish off. A couple of helpful reminders just before we get started. If you have any comments or questions, please use the chat box and we will compile those and try to get to as many as we can at the end of the program. And then also, because we have a lot of people joining us tonight, please keep yourself muted and your video off throughout the program. That way we'll get a really good quality video and recording for everybody. As I said, it'll be recorded. So if you want to keep yourself off video, just if you don't want to be recorded, then this will go up on our YouTube afterwards and everybody will get to share. And then lastly, if you enjoy this program, consider becoming a member of the Historical Society. You can check out more at our website at azhs.org/membership. I'm gonna give a quick spiel about the Historical Society. Our mission statement here is connecting people through the power of Arizona's history. And that is one of my favorite photos. The AHS is a nonprofit organization and a state agency that was established even before statehood in 1864. Together, we collect, preserve, and tell the story of Arizona's past through museum exhibitions, libraries and archives, historic sites, educational programs, and the Journal of Arizona History. And like I said, if you enjoy what you see, there are a couple different ways you can stay connected to us. You can become a member, you can sign up for our email list so you get news about upcoming programs. You can follow us on social media. You can order a specialty monsoon license plate where a portion of the proceeds come back to us to help support our mission. And you can find more information about all of this at azhs.org. All right, so just to get started, I want to say, so I'm Perry Pyle, I'm an archivist here at the Tucson location. This project came about when we were awarded a grant from the Union Pacific Foundation that is dedicated to sharing content and things that we have in our collections related to Arizona's railroad history. So a couple of teammates and I from museum collections and archivists got together and digitized a lot of our materials and put them online into a dedicated site, a page on our website that you can reach by going to azhs.org, azhs.org/railways of Arizona. And that'll take you directly to the site where we've got a lot of exciting stuff. We've got artifacts and photos and documents and oral histories that we digitized and were able to share. So that's me. I'm going to pass it around in a circle to have our speakers introduce themselves, and then we will pop back and each of them are going to take about 20 minutes and talk about, I actually gave it was very vague, like, hey, you speak from the heart, speak about whatever you'd like to speak about railroad history. So we've got some really interesting topics coming up. So Ken, if you would get started for me.
Sure. I'm Ken Karrels, Southern Arizona Transportation Museum. Call myself a volunteer. And we all are volunteers there.
All aboard.
All aboard. I hear the train coming. And that was the sound that you would have heard when you came into Yuma. And about September 30th, 1877. I'll stop it there. I think you want to just go around and introduce everyone. Is that what you're doing?
Yes, if we hop over to Bill,
Yes.
just for a quick introduction, just say who you are.
Hi, my name is Bill Colt. I'm a native Tucsonan, and I wrote the book Tucson Was a Railroad Town, interviewed over 50 men and women, conductors, engineers, brakemen, dispatchers, superintendents that work for the railroad here in Tucson. That's my introduction.
All right, and George?
I'm a semi-retired physician. I came to Arizona in 1970, and my first job as a physician was in Ajo, Arizona for Phelps Dodge, and that's where I got together with the railroads there. In fact, it was one of the reasons I decided to go to Ajo. I've been a member of Old Pueblo Trolley. I was their motorman as well as welder for many, many years, and still am a member in our facility on 36th and 4th Avenue. I always liked railroads, and I'm not a historian, so bear with me when it's my turn to speak. I tried to put some things together that hopefully will be interesting.
All right, perfect. Well, then let's go back, hop back to Ken, and Ken, take it away.
Okay, well, on a sunny Sunday in September 1877, the Southern Pacific Railroad came into Yuma, and the townspeople heard the following sound for the first time. Later, the same sound was heard in Tucson, Arizona, about 1880, March 20th. Bill Colt will go into more detail on the arrival. The Arizona grew as a result of the railroad coming in, both north and south. But let me just touch over the Atlantic and Pacific Railroad. The A&P, later, of course, Santa Fe, Burlington, crossed the 35th parallel, or the Santa Fe Trail, and the towns of Winslow, Williams, Holbrook, Kingman, they sprung up to life almost like weeds in Tucson after a rainfall. Gold was discovered at Sutter Mill in California in 1849. So gold fever was starting to in the air, and people were starting to get the itch to go west. And it was silver, mines, timber, copper, cattle, climate, cotton, citrus that motivated our early pioneers to kind of venture out. With the transcontinental travel, the need for time zones became ever so important. Keep in mind, at that point in time, each town had its own respective version of what the correct time is, and they would go out and look at high noon, and they set it from there, but they had not a monopoly on it. And so bottom line is that there had to be some civilization as far as creating some organization, and thus the 4 time zones that we have today, at least in the States here, was developed around that time. And then 1883, and then finalized in 1918. The time, let me just quote Bill Colt in his publication, because in there he says there's the general time inspector of the Southern Pacific Railroad by the name of Webb Ball. And Webb Ball designed a system of watches and clocks inspection adopted by most of the country's large railroads. Each day, about high noon, Ball would personally receive correct time over the wire from the Naval Observatory in Washington, D.C., and it set his clock. He placed standard clocks across the SP system, and inspectors made about twice a month checks. Watches became, of course, less important as central traffic control systems were developed in around up until the mid-50s. Of course, we still need time. Conductors still use, of course, their watches, and they have to be calibrated and checked by the second. But if you want to see the CTC machine, stop over at the Tucson Depot, the train depot, and in the waiting room, you'll see are now archaic little machine, but it's impressive. And then, again, I urge you to stop in there. By the turn of the century, the need for leisure time grew and tourism developed throughout the Southwest. So Sunset Magazine was created by the Southern Pacific Railroad in May of about 1898 to invite folks to just kind of get a taste and see and feel of the Southwest. In fact, it was quoted that, well, where sunshine will cure all and no one ever gets sick. Dude branches, they sprung up like weeds also, and hotels like La Posada and Winslow and El Tovar at the Grand Canyon. Also, President Teddy Roosevelt was a strong proponent and supporter of monuments in the canyon. Was there when they had the opening and the dedication in 1901 with the train going up to the canyon. Along with the Fred Harvey girls, they brought a sense of refinement, fine dining along the Santa Fe route. The gateway to the Grand Canyon was around 1901. You could slumber in the Harvey Hotel in Williams before going up to 65 miles up to the Grand Canyon. Goods and supplies, just in general, let's talk about not just the Grand, but all within the Southwest at this time, were taken over by cross by wagon train, and then took about a week on that time period. It was reduced to just 2 days. By the roaring 20s, passenger rail was at its highest usage. Later, with the transcontinental highways, folks found it more convenient to travel by their own car, their own auto, and by air. At the same time, railroads could see the importance of increased freight revenue, and at the same time, a reduction of rail passenger dollars and travelers at the same time. So it was far, far less costly to ship produce than to transport people, dining cars, baggage cars, sleeping cars, et cetera, and staff. The top 20 railroad execs petitioned to Congress to eliminate the costly rail service. In 1970, Congress established the Rail Service Act, the Rail Passenger Service Act, and thus Amtrak was born. Amtrak, of course, came with a contraction of America and trains, and so they shrunk it down to Amtrak. In May of 71, the Tucson resident, Tony Haswell, treasurer of our old Pueblo Trolley and founder of the National Association of Rail Passengers, has earned the moniker Father of Amtrak. Today, we have passenger stations in Tucson, Benson, Yuma, Maricopa, and to the north, Flagstaff, Winslow, Williams, and Kingman. Now back to the future. On July 13th of this year, Tucson's Mayor Romero and about 10 other mayors got together along the Sunshine Corridor, Tucson and Phoenix, and sent a letter to Arizona congressional leaders requesting support for a regional rail system. The plan would provide for 3 trips per day, and would provide for daily service, of course, and then also increase the service to go up to Phoenix. The trip would go Tucson, Marana, Coolidge, Cave Creek, Tempe, Sky Harbor, and then Buckeye, extending 2 trains per day. Then along, one would be, of course, the current Sunset. This service would necessitate probably a 3rd main. There will be some negotiating, obviously, with the Union Pacific Railroad, and some people are very cautious about picking in the direction. It won't be just a cakewalk, because there's some track maintenance that has to be done, as well as the fact that there has to add another probably line of track, the main line. So it's ripe for upgrading to about 110 miles per hour to about 125 miles per hour in that northern area. But of course, construction will take several years, contingent, of course, on funding from the infrastructure bill that's being discussed in Congress and support from our state of Arizona and beyond. Thus, Phoenix would once again regain its train service. Right now, as you know, the train does go up to Maricopa and down to Yuma, but it was curtailed at its Phoenix in 1996 after a major derailment in Hyder, Arizona. Later, it was described more than derailment, it was sabotage. And so the plan now is to eventually see how Phoenix will get its transportation by Amtrak. If time, let's briefly, let me just talk about classification systems. Arizona had about 76 small railroads at one time, or at least cumulatively. And so railroads are broken down into classes and the sense of a class 1 railroad. And right now we have Union Pacific and Santa Fe Burlington as the major players. In order to be in the so-called class 1 club, it's at least revenue of at least $500 million. Short line railroads and terminal railroads were involved mainly in whether it was lumber, timber, mining, such as Apache Railways, Arizona and California, Arizona Central, Arizona Eastern. One that I would want to point out is Copper Basin in Hayden. Copper Basin Railway was run by Jake Jacobson. Jake since retired, and he's quite a interesting gentleman. He's been noted as the John Wayne of railroading. It's been recognized by Railway Age Journal and Railroader of the Year. The next, as far as sticking just to the short line area, was the Port of Tucson. The Port of Tucson is headed up by Alan Levine, Mike, and Matt. It's a family operation. It's been very, very successful. It's located, for those of you in Tucson, it's just a South Cove Road and I-10. You'll see a flurry of hundreds of freight cars coming in 6 days a week. They have 11 miles of track, and what they're doing is it's an intermodal system in Leonard Park. And so they're getting the containers coming in off at Long Beach and then coming into Tucson and then for distribution. So passenger railroads, briefly, Amtrak, of course, Valley Metro in Phoenix area, Tempe streetcar, Sunlink, 4 miles of downtown traffic in Tucson, and then Old Pueblo Trolley, which was mentioned by Dr. George. Right now, Old Pueblo Trolley is not running. It started in about 1983, and George was one of the pioneers with it. These suppressed, right now, operations have stopped, and Sunlink is taking on the same area. And the plan now is eventually to resume, perhaps in South Tucson, so we could see once again a heritage rail along 4th Avenue, perhaps. The organization is headed up by Gene Kaywood. He's the CEO. Heritage and scenic railroads. Let me just talk a little bit briefly. Grand Canyon and Williams, and again I mentioned an El Tovar Hotel, designed by the famous architect Mary Jane Coulter. Trip on the train covers about 65 miles. Just an FYI, this just came in today, I found out. They ordinarily run diesel up and down the 65 miles, but starting this September 4th, it's and then September 18th, they'll be running live steam. And they'll be going, get there about 8:30, and it'll leave about 9:30, and then they'll come back around about 5:45 up to Canyon and back. Again, live steam, and I think it's a 282 and a 280 that they'll be using. Interesting enough, they don't burn coal or oil, general oil, or wood, of course, but they're using what just called vegetable oil. And it smells like French fries. Well, don't be surprised, you're not losing it, because it's a good way of recycling. So again, the trip is well worth, get up there if you can, September 4th and September 18th, make reservations early. Also, it's a fun family event to go up there, only because you can all do many things, but one of the unique surprises is about halfway up the canyon, 30 miles up, they run a surprise train robbery, and you've got the cowboys on horses, and they stop the train, and then they come up into the cars and pass out goodies to the kids. The other is Burbed Canyon in Clarksdale and Cottonwood area, not too far from Sedona. There you have bald eagles soaring just over your head practically in the wintertime, and surround yourself in canyon walls, and just it's magnificent. It just is, I can't say enough. It's 42 miles of a journey, and it's accessible only by rail, of course, inside, and around about 4 hours to go through the whole trip. You also go through about a 680-foot long tunnel. So again, a Burbed Canyon in Clarksdale, Cottonwood. Check it out. They run diesel only. They don't have steam or like occasionally that is done at Williams. So in conclusion, the use of train travel reduces our carbon footprint, reduces highway traffic and accidents. I think most of us would agree that I-10 is a little crowded, and increases safety. So with that, I will turn over a new train is going to be taking off pretty soon, and turn it over to William Call. Well, your train is coming.
Perfect. Well, let's pass it on over to Bill. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you. Cool.
Yes. Good evening. My name is Bill Kalt, and today I'd like to share with you some stories and a little of the impact on the railroad here in Tucson during the days of steam and in what the newspapers called the Big Berg on the main line. And it's just getting my slides to move. Right again here. As Dr. Carroll said, the first train into Arizona came in 1877, but the train didn't reach Tucson until March 20th of 1880. Now, at the time, Tucson, since 1864, as a matter of fact, the year that the Arizona Pioneer Historical Society was founded, has been referred to as Arizona's ancient and honorable Pueblo. And when the train rolled in, there were about 7,000 people here, more dogs than people, actually. Tucson did more commerce with Mexico than any other city in the nation. One-story adobe buildings, slanted streets, no water system, no sewerage system. You might say that pilgrims coming here found a little bit of the Wild West in Tucson, Arizona. Well, as I say, it was March 20th of 1880 that the train rolled into Tucson, and down at the Southern Arizona Transportation Museum, we celebrate that event every year right around the date on the weekend with the Silver Spike Jubilee. And Dr. Karrels has been able to find 7 descendants of people that were actually there when the train came in that day. And we do a brief reenactment, and then the band plays and the kids have a lot of fun. And if you get a chance, come when the museum is ready to do it again, to the Silver Spike Jubilee. Well, the train changed an awful lot. It made the train trip to Los Angeles was actually only a couple days as opposed to a whole week riding in a rough stagecoach. The railroad expanded mining tremendously. And as a matter of fact, at one point, Arizona was the 4th leading producer in the world of copper. The railroad was able to bring in the large equipment needed and haul out for mining and to haul out tons of ore. The railroad also expanded the cattle industry, as all of a sudden driving herds all the way in to far off locations, it became much easier to drive them to the railroad track. And you can still see cattle pens along the line that were used to load cattle into cars. Well, maybe one of the most important things that the railroad did was to dig wells here in Tucson and all along its line to provide water for its great steam engine and its workers and its passengers. Everybody's talked quite a bit, I think, about the fact that the material goods that came into Tucson were quite amazing compared to what could be brought in by long trains of wagons drawn by mules and horses. Lumber, El Paso pressed brick, because Tucson's brick was somewhat soft at the time. Furniture, wagons, paint, windows, doors, even thumbtacks came into Tucson much faster. Railroad also brought foodstuff, many that people had never seen before. Right around the time the train came, Joseph Stresovich advertised fresh fruit and fresh fish, such as Tucsonans had never seen before. Well, the changes that came about as a result of the railroad for consumers really wreaked havoc in the business community. Freighters with trains of mules and horses were trapped into contracts that all of a sudden became much more costly than goods could be shipped on railroads, and much more slowly. So all of a sudden they were at a great disadvantage. And some of the big firms here in Tucson went bankrupt, including the Tully and Ochoa firm. Firms like Louis Zeckendorf's Mercantile and Leo Goldschmidt's furniture store survived because they adjusted to the change in prices. Well, the railroad also brought people from all over the world with ideas and inventions that sparked a whole new beginning intellectually here in Tucson. Another thing that happened was that all of a sudden there was much more entertainment, including trick stallions that came into Tucson. Well, the railroad, in addition to all the material things that it changed the culture and the society of Tucson also. Rail workers that were called rails, and still are, rails built communities like Tucson all across the nation. Their large numbers and regular paydays meant stability to otherwise transient towns such as ours. The size and power of rail equipment made danger railroaders constant companion, and their work demanded safety, security, accuracy, and industry. The company chose reliable, honest, trustworthy men, shunning the alcoholic, the slacker, and the hanger-on. All of a sudden, Tucson streets started to fill. Oh, I shut that. All of a sudden, Tucson streets started to fill with conductors. The thundering steam engines meant engineers, conductors, engineers, telegraphers. They all started filling city streets. And a mystique grew around railroaders. Railroad songs and traditions were built. Many of the railroad men and women played key roles in the economy and society and the politics of our community, such as Mayor Happy Houston, who was a longtime engineer here in Tucson. Happy's family remembered that he would run an engine all night downtown in the yard, come home, take a shower, eat breakfast, put on his hat, and rush back downtown to be mayor. Unfortunately, the hectic schedule killed Happy in 1950 when he died of a heart attack up in Phoenix. Many people on the railroad also pursued private interests, such as this gentleman, Colonel Epps Randolph. Perhaps many of you have heard of Randolph Park, now Reed Park. The golf course retains Colonel Randolph's name. Colonel Randolph was instrumental in developing the railroads throughout southern Arizona and into northern Mexico. He also built 700 miles of streetcar line in Los Angeles and saved the Imperial Valley from flood in 1907. A remarkable man. If you do not know his history, check him out. Well, during the steam era, the words payday rang with a special wonder. Running but once a month, the gold wagon bought gold and cash to pay the railroaders all along the line. And when the running of the ghost occurred, as they called it back then, rails stood a little taller, walked a little prouder, assured of the fact that all that effort had been worth it. These men are all engineers here, and the gentleman holding the baby is Mr. Bruce. He was the engineer that brought the first train into Tucson in 1880. His house still stands on South 12th Avenue. And I'll tell you, to me, this looks like a musical group called the Engineers. Well, all the way up into the 1950s, paydays were special here in Tucson, and people dressed in their finest to walk the street and pay their bills at the carniceria, the panaderia, and the tienda, and to socialize with all their friends as they walked along. People of all ages, religions, and heritages mingled on the streets of Tucson. It was a grand social affair that died out eventually as downtown kind of died here in Tucson. Railroaders that I interviewed explained that for many years, there was what they referred to as a railroad clique here in Tucson. Well, those paydays meant that all the merchants got paid and could again order for the coming week's supplies. It also meant that men working on the railroad could step into the local bars and quench their thirst with their newfound gold. It was 1903 when the SP stopped paying their workers in gold. They issued checks, and for a while, the workers were confused and didn't know how to deal with that until Consolidated Bank finally agreed to cash the checks for the workers. This is a picture of the Cactus Saloon right across the street from the depot in about 1898, owned by John Heidel, who owned the Heidel Hotel later on, right down the street. Now, formerly the MacArthur Building, and now the Madden Advertising Agency. Well, as the Arizona Daily Star said, the pay car came and everybody's happy, right down to the canine and favorite baby. One of the most interesting aspects of the railroad here in Tucson was the contribution that the Chinese community made to the economy of Tucson. Because railroaders being paid once a month had to buy everything on credit. And as a result, the Chinese people kept in their grocery stores a book by name of every purchase made. When the payday came, the railroaders would go back to the store. And for instance, if they had run up a charge of $40, they would pay that off and walk right back in and buy $40 worth of goods that would go back on the books. At the time, people such as Mr. Lee Ott, who came to Tucson after running his grocery store in San Francisco and ran a store at 51 and 71 South Meyer, would give pilones. And you can see the jars along the side, on the right side, center and lower half of the picture of little candies, pilones, that were given to the children of the railroad workers as little, maybe you might say gratuities or bribes to get the family to come back and shop at their store. At one point along Church Street in the 30s, there were 37 Chinese markets, a real contribution to Tucson's economy that not that many people may know about. Well, all this and a lot more history can be found at the Southern Arizona Transportation Museum, 414 North Toole in the Depot Complex. As I mentioned, the Silver Spike is one of the big events that the museum puts on, all free to everyone in the community. In addition, we celebrate National Train Day, Tucson's birthday, and the Holiday Express. Again, everything free. So come on down to the Southern Arizona Transportation Museum. You can also climb up into the historic locomotive number 1673, the last steam engine that ever ran here in Southern Arizona. You could get up there and ring that bell in the engine and be a part of Arizona history. Well, the Southern Pacific had a monopoly on freighting especially, and passenger service, but especially freight here in Southern Arizona until the El Paso and Southwestern arrived. The brainchild of James S. Douglas, entrepreneur and owner and head of Phelps Dodge Corporation, established a station in Benson in 1902, and in 1912 arrived here in Tucson, and that's the picture that you see here, and really gave the SP Railroad a lot of competition. And at this point then, I'd like to hand it over to Dr. George Sokol.
Thank you so much, Bill. All right, George, you are up. And you just let me know whenever you'd like me to pull up the photos that you sent. Let's unmute you. Let's get you unmuted first. You can click that. Did it give you a notification? There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Can do.
Okay. The El Paso and Southwestern Railroad that Bill Call just mentioned was instrumental in the copper mine industry here in Arizona. And it ties in with the little railroad in Ajo in many different ways that are quite complicated. But basically, the railroad in Ajo, actually, if one thinks of it as hauling copper, had to start back when copper was first discovered in Ajo. The old mines were discovered by the Spaniards in the 1700s when they were first here. And the copper was mined and hauled to the Gulf of California, where it was put on ships, went around the Horn all the way to Wales for smelting. Then the mines went dormant for many years, and in 1854 started having new discoveries. By 1884, there was talk of actually a railroad to the Gulf, and actually Pima County bonds were floated for this enterprise, which never really went anywhere. But this was one of the ideas that later on El Paso and Southwestern had for not only the mines in Ajo, but also for a railroad to the Gulf. In 1884, in Ajo, a fellow named Tom Childs, along with Ruby Daniels, actually hauled some wagon loads of copper to Tucson. And it was felt that the mines there could possibly be worth something for railroads to come to. So in 1908, basically, let's see, I'm getting ahead of myself. The mines were explored by Greenway, who many people I'm sure know of, and a fellow named Giralaman. And the copper there was felt to be very rich. So the railroad idea in Ajo of what then became the Tucson Cornelia and Gila Bend Railroad was started by Greenway and Giralaman in 1911. By 1916, the railroad was running well, and Greenway felt that he wanted a connection other than the SP for his copper. So he started exploring the possibility of going to the Gulf. Actually, it was planned and surveyed through a place called Copper Canyon, south of Ajo, and went all the way to St. George's Bay. This never developed more, because by 1924, the El Paso and Southwestern, which had the Phelps Dodge interests in Ajo, joined with the SP, and they had a route from Ajo to Gila Bend that was working well. The railroad then developed and then became the railroad that I knew when I came to Ajo in 1970. The railroad was one of the last mixed trains, had one of the last mixed trains daily in the United States, from Ajo to what the SP timetable called Gila, for Gila Bend, 44 miles north of Ajo. The price to ride the caboose was 97 cents. And of course, round trip didn't break you either. So a lot of people just came to ride the mixed train from Ajo to Gila Bend. Going back, the actually mine railroad for the pit in Ajo started producing copper, hauling copper in 1916, 1917. And they used 17 steam locomotives to do this. That ran until the Depression, when the mine closed for 3 or 4 years, and then started up again until the war years, which was a very needed commodity for the war, the copper was. And after the war, the railroad continued, but they scrapped the steam locomotives and started with their diesels, and for a time actually had electric haulage. They had built catenary for the electric locomotives, and this lasted until they got stronger diesels in 1966. And when I was there, it was a 24/7 operation, 24 hours a day. Our home was just across the little hill from the big pit, and you could hear locomotives 24 hours a day. It was either dynamic braking going down into the pit, or the diesel growl coming out of the pit, which never stopped. In 1966, they got radio controlled engines, and people would run out of the pit in the little end car with the engine pushing from the back. This was fraught with some danger, as to one of the biggest accidents that happened there was when one of the engineers was asleep and went through the crusher trestle, of course, with disastrous results. On the whole, though, there weren't many accidents in the mine, but when they happened, they'd always call for the doctor to go down. So I had to crawl through many cabs down there, checking on engineers. And the only fatality, luckily, was the one that went through the trestle at the crusher when on the radio controlled end of the train. Many people liked the little railroad from Ajo to Gila Bend in later years, just to ride the caboose, and the children to experience their first railroad, and it just with Ray Phillips as engineer and Tom Wiley as conductor, it was all a very pleasant experience. The railroad hauled copper anodes to the Gila joint with Southern Pacific, which then went to the El Paso smelter. And this continued until the mine closed in the mid-1980s. And then subsequently, after the smelter and a mine was closed for a couple of years, the railroad was not run anymore, and was run for the last time to haul out locomotives and cars for scrap. Actually, there are some remaining things from the railroad that are still intact. The railroad station, beautiful station in Ajo, is there. And there also exists some cars. There's a car at the Ajo Historical Society, one of the old dump cars. And then 3 boxcars exist. Boxcars were rare to begin with, but they were saved. And one is in Pasadena, California at Heritage Square, another at the Chandler Museum in Phoenix. And we have one here at our old Pueblo Trolley facility on 36th and 4th Avenue. So one still has some remnant of the Tucson, Cornelia, and Gila Bend Railroad. I think that's about it. I left out a whole actual story about how the railroad got started. It was very much supported by Greenway and Joralemon. And I think I mentioned that he was instrumental in also laying out a railroad to the Gulf of California, which never though materialized. So the history of the railroad is very interesting, and I did want to mention the places where you can get more information on it. It's Railroads of Arizona, Volume 1 by David Merrick in 1975. Also Railroad Magazine, October 1973, pages 26, 28, and Arizona Highways, August 1977. And one thing I didn't mention, one of the real highlights of my time in Ajo was when they filmed the movie Man Who Loved Cat Dancing with Sarah Miles and Burt Reynolds. And they had the little engine that has been for many years, or was for many years here in Tucson, the Reno number 11. They had trucked it in, and then my good friend Dave Reese, that was a rail historian, and also employee of Phelps Dodge, made it possible for us to ride that engine up and down the little line from Childs, which was the first station, to Ajo, back and forth. And I believe some movies of that from the Reese collection still exist, and will inveigh upon Ken to maybe someday be able to show these movies. But in any case, it was actually written about in the Railroad magazine story. And I'll close now, and then some of the photos or the pictures that I have, I'll just mention very briefly as they come to be seen.
All right, let me pull up your photos. And I'll share it correctly this time. Let's play my.
This is Engineer Ray Phillips on the line from Ajo to Gila, and right behind him on the flat car, the anodes are being shipped to Gila to be transferred
George.
to the Southern Pacific. And then on
George, just one second. Your audio is
Paso.
cutting out.
Ray Phillips was the engineer the whole time that I was there, from 1970 to 90. Yes.
Yeah, let's fix that.
Can you hear me
George,
now?
can you unmute yourself?
Can you hear me now?
Oh, your audio is cutting out a bit.
Okay, well, just show the pictures and that'll give them, yeah.
Okay. Right.
That's the caboose on mixed train. Can you hear me?
A little bit. We'll just keep going through.
Okay, yeah, that's the way, that's Tom Wiley there, the conductor. This is the Reno number 11 at Child Station, where it was kept between the runs for the movie. This is another picture of the Reno. This is at Plain of Ross, which was just north of the Child Station.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Perfect.
this is the line. Yeah.
There we
There's a line.
go. Okay, we can still see you, but it's just a little, your audio is a little cutting out.
Okay. Anyway, that last picture was a line to Gila Bend, just 3/4 of the way to Gila Bend.
Great. Well, I appreciate all of the photos that y'all shared. These are fantastic, and it's always nice to see more photos. That's that was my impression when I walked into the Southern Arizona Transportation Museum, where there's just, you know, floor to ceiling memorabilia and photos and oral histories, and it's really, if you haven't been there, I highly suggest it. So we have a couple of this is actually run perfectly on time. Thank you all for that. And we have just a couple of questions. If anybody else has any questions they'd like to submit in the chat, some of them we discussed a little bit in the chat, but I was wondering if we could say them out loud, which is somebody was asking about recommended reads on railroad history in Arizona. So if you were to suggest your favorite book other than yours, Bill.
Yes, David Myrick's Volume 1, Railroads of Arizona, is the Bible of railroading here in Southern Arizona. He also has other books of railroading in Arizona. A gentleman, I see one of the questions is regarding railroads in Northern Arizona, and I'm not sure of the volume, but David Myrick also has a wonderful volume on Northern Arizona railroads also. David Devine wrote a book, a local Tucson journalist, Scandal, Slavery, and Steel Rails, which tells about the laying of the track across the conflicts that occurred and things of that nature. So that's a good one.
When it comes to speaking about the Northern Arizona Railroad, so we focused in this program today on all of us from Southern Arizona or in the Southern Arizona area, but I was surprised to learn that there are railroad museums and archives throughout the state. So there's a big one in Chandler, there's one in Williams, and so I think I would suggest, reaching out to them. I tried at first to make it a more statewide, but just in terms of logistics, it's easier for me in Tucson to get all of us together. But there are so many resources out there, and a lot of our photos that we have from the Historical Society that are Flagstaff related are kept at NAU at Klein Library Special Collections. So they have a lot of our photo collections, and they've actually digitized a lot of them and put them online. So I'll put that in the chat so everyone can see it. And then we had another question that came in towards the beginning of the program that they were wondering if they misheard. But Ken, did you say that there were at one point 76 railroads in Arizona? Oh, unmute.
Unmute.
There we go.
Yeah, that's the, I'm checking with a little fact check. That was the number that was cumulative. We're talking throughout the whole state. If you look at the number of small mining railroads and that, and just even in Southern Arizona, we just, not the whole state. I mean, when you go in the museum, you'll see at least a list of 20, 25 railroads that are no longer running. So that's at least the figure I was able to find checking around.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It really just never ends. So I'm going to wrap us up just so we stay exactly on time, but I want to say thank you to everybody who attended. Thank you for your interesting comments in the chat. And just a reminder, I have one more little plug for something that Ken worked really hard to get set up at the Southern Arizona Transportation Museum, is that you can actually watch the trains roll into Tucson and Flagstaff actually in real time. If you go on YouTube, I'll share it in the chat right now, but it's called Virtual Rail Fan, and they worked really hard to get that put up. And people tune in from all over the world to see, yeah, Ken, if you want to say anything about it, but quite popular.
Yeah, just real quick, we're winding up here, but the chat comments around the world from as far as Australia, India, I didn't know Tucson had mountains. I love the blue sky. It's one of the most popular. There's about 50 different locations on Virtual Rail Fan as far as headquartered in Tennessee. But where I'm going with this one, remember in February we had snow, and again the comments were international. We didn't know Tucson had snow, so it's putting Tucson on the map, and it's also providing a sense of awareness and security as well. So Virtual Rail Fan, tune it in.
Yeah, it brings.
There's about 1,000 people sometimes when train comes in on Sunday, train number 1 from New Orleans, just watching on the camera on the camp.
Absolutely. So tune in. I shared it in the chat, and I will share one more time just the link that goes directly to our Railways of Arizona digital hub on our website, where you can go and just peruse and see all sorts of clips of oral histories and videos that we've made and do a jigsaw puzzle. So thank you again to all our presenters and all our attendees, and keep an eye out for the email that'll come as a follow-up that'll be sharing the link with you.
Thank
Great
you.
job. Thank you very much.
Good
Thank you,
job.
everyone.
Appreciate it. Getting the word out.
Thank you.
Thank you.